From 4 on ABC RN.
This is RN Breakfast. Hamish McDonald here through until 9 o'clock. Hope you're having a good Tuesday morning so far. 1 in 5 children starting school in Australia are not on track with their development, and children are twice as likely to be in this category if they live in rural or a remote area. But families trying to get diagnoses and treatment for these kids are facing critical shortages of paediatric and other specialist care. Parts of New South Wales, for example, are reporting wait times of up to 4 years, and some services are not taking any new patients with behavioural problems at all. Jacqueline Emery is the Chief Executive of Royal Far West, a charity that's been trying to breach the gap in public and private services by providing telehealth care for children and their families. She joins me this morning. Good morning to you.
Morning, Hamish.
Is this problem getting worse?
Look, it is getting worse, and the gap is widening for two main reasons. First of all, yes, the critical workforce shortages, but also we're seeing increased complexity in the children and families that we're supporting.
And what sorts of conditions and challenges are these children facing? What are we talking about here?
Well, look, it's such a broad range when you're talking about developmental challenges. So it can be anything from autism, ADHD, right through to anxiety, mood disorders. And I'm talking about children aged between 3 and 12.
And so, practically speaking, what's the situation that families find themselves in if they do live in a remote or regional area? What do they have to do to try and access the services they need?
So, look, often families, first up, don't actually recognise that there may be an issue with their child because, first of all, they may not have access to early education and care, which is often where a child might be picked up of having one of these challenges. So they're not really understanding that there may be an issue until their child starts school. And once they do that, what we find is that teachers are fantastic at identifying that there may be an issue for a child. And so next step normally is to go to a GP, which is a gateway to a lot of services and a gateway even to Royal Far West services. And so that's when they start going through this process of, number one, trying to navigate the health system and then getting on incredibly long wait lists or having just actually not being able to access a service at all. And so it can be incredibly frustrating for parents that ultimately just want to see their child get help. And when we think about a child's development, 90% of a child's brain has developed by the time they're 5 years of age. And so the longer you wait for accessing this kind of support, the more difficult it is to actually have an impact on these developmental challenges.
And when you say long wait times, what are we talking about? How long might someone be waiting?
Well, at the moment, for many families, it's not even a matter of a wait time. Paediatricians just are not taking any more children onto their books. They've closed their books in most parts of rural New South Wales. That's where we're up to. In other cases, it's a minimum of 18 months to sometimes up to 4 years.
And I know you've been talking to public and private paediatricians across regional New South Wales. Some are saying that their books are actually closed to children who require developmental support. How do they justify or explain that?
Look, it's just, everyone in the system is under pressure and they're prioritising medical, physical issues, which are often considered more acute. Now, developmental challenges sometimes are considered non-acute, but for the child that's actually struggling to make friends, to be able to communicate, completely locked out of learning in some cases because of their developmental challenge, it may not be considered acute, but it's actually really, it has a lifelong impact on these kids. And that's the issue. There's just so much need.
And where does this leave the families? I mean, I imagine there must be quite a few people in distress.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the families that we see that, you know, hold on through this process, it's just so frustrating for them. And, they feel the inequity of living in a rural and remote area. You know, why is it that they don't have the same access to care that you can get in the city?
And what about the role of telehealth? Does that change the dynamic at all?
Oh, absolutely. You know, telehealth, it is important to have face-to-face connection, and we certainly do that as well. But kids love telehealth. We've been doing telehealth since 2014 with children. It's such a wonderful modality. Often we deliver these services actually into schools where there's great internet. We're also building the capacity of teachers that are working with those children. And it just can't be not considered in the mix, because it does overcome some of these workforce shortages. You know, in some rural areas, you've never had workforce. And at the moment, we know that there's over 6,000 vacancies for medical practitioners across the nation in rural and remote areas. So you're not going to overcome these issues overnight. So telehealth absolutely has a place, and it works fantastic for families as well. We find that families are just so grateful they don't have to take days off work, they don't have to take all the kids out of school to travel, you know, up to 200 kilometres or more to access a specialist appointment. We deliver this telehealth into the school on a weekly basis, and that's where you start to see great traction with kids, because you can get them in that really important developmental window.
There has been this long-running issue of, as you point out, getting appropriate doctors and medical staff into rural and regional communities. Do you see any significant change in that right now? I mean, there's all sorts of different programs being offered to get them there, funding, housing, all the rest of it, but it doesn't seem to be shifting the dial.
Look, it's really challenging. I mean, it is a complex set of issues. Housing shortages are still a major factor. Also, accessing early education and care. We know in over 400 rural and remote communities are considered childcare deserts. So if you're a health professional with a young family and you can't get access to care, then you can't go to work. So that's complex. And also, for a lot of medical practitioners, it's just it's difficult to make that move. You can't, your access to sort of private patients and the ability to, earn an extra income through that is limited, and also the complexities around other workforce shortages of other professionals in the area. It's a hard gig, and I suppose a lot of people just aren't taking that option.
And the challenges that you've been describing this morning, are these uniform? I know you work in a particular part of the country, but are these uniform nationwide in remote and regional areas?
Oh, absolutely. Victoria has less remote areas, but still we're working in a Victorian school in Rainbow, and they just can't access allied health support. So speech pathology, occupational therapy, psychology, and those professions are incredibly important in terms of supporting children with developmental challenges. So that is nationwide.
Jacqueline Emery, Chief Executive of Royal Far West, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamish.